The rope burned through her hands before she even had time to think. Maren hit the ice at a run, through the coil wide, and felt the weight of it snatch her forward, off her feet, across the frozen surface, toward the break in the river where the current ran fastest and the black horse was going under for the third time. She didn't think. She held on. The ice cracked under her knees. The cold came up through her palms. The horse screamed, a sound she had never heard from any animal, something between rage and terror, and she screamed back at him. "Don't you let go. Don't you dare let go." He didn't. Neither did she. She never remembered how they got to the bank. Only that she was lying on frozen mud with her cheek against the ground, and something enormous and warm was breathing against her neck, and every muscle in her body had stopped working entirely. She lay there for a long time. Then she got up, looped what was left of the rope around his neck, and walked him home. He was the most beautiful animal she had ever seen. Black from nose to tail, with a silver marking on his chest like a palm pressed flat, strange and deliberate, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. He was tall enough that she had to reach up to check his ears for cold damage. He stood perfectly still and let her do it. "You don't belong here," she told him. He looked at her with large dark eyes and said nothing, which was more honesty than most people gave her. She named him Sable, fed him the last of her winter grain, and put him in the barn with 2 blankets she couldn't really spare. Then she went inside, sat down at her kitchen table, and let her hands shake for a little while. They had earned it. Outside, the Greyvale River moved beneath its ice, slow and indifferent. Ashvin was quiet. The Frost Road was empty. Nobody had come looking. 3 days passed. On the first morning she woke to find him standing outside her bedroom window. Not pawing, not restless, just standing there, watching the house, as if he had appointed himself to a duty she hadn't assigned. "You're not a dog," she told him through the glass. He didn't move. She brought him inside the fence. On the second day her neighbor Petra came to borrow a mending needle and stopped dead at the gate. "Maren." Petra's voice was very careful. "Where did you get that horse?" "River." "You pulled that out of the river?" "He helped," Maren said. Petra looked at Sable. Sable looked at Petra. Something in his gaze made Petra take a small step back without seeming to realize she'd done it. "He's not natural," Petra said quietly. "He's cold and he was drowning," Maren said. "That's natural enough." Petra took her needle and left quickly, and didn't look back. On the third morning, Maren found something tangled in Sable's mane while she was brushing him down, a silver medallion on a broken cord. She worked it loose carefully and held it up to the barn light. The crest on it meant nothing to her. A crown above a running horse, intricate and old. She set it on the kitchen windowsill and forgot about it. She was pulling water from the well when she heard the horses on the road. 4 of them. Riders in chest plates, cloaks the color of ash, an emblem on their armor that matched the medallion exactly. They stopped at her gate with the practiced stillness of men who delivered difficult news for a living. The one at the front was lean and gray-haired, with a face like something carved from old wood. He looked at Sable standing at Maren's shoulder. He looked at Maren. "I am Commander Vaughn," he said. "Rider of the King's First Guard, in service to His Majesty Draven of Valdenmoor." He paused. "That horse belongs to the crown." Maren said nothing. "He is the sacred stallion of Valdenmoor," Vaughn continued. "Lost during a crossing of the Greyvale 10 days ago. The entire kingdom has been searching." His voice was not unkind. "Simply factual, the way a stone wall is factual. You will be compensated for your care of him. He will be returned to the capital immediately." Maren looked at Sable. Sable looked at Maren. "He was drowning," she said. "Yes. And you saved him, and the king is grateful." Vaughn nodded once, something between a bow and a dismissal. "You have our thanks." She wanted to argue. She understood, very clearly, that she had no argument to make. He was a king's commander. Sable was a king's horse. She was a farmer with mud on her boots standing in the yard of a farm that barely kept her alive. She stepped aside. Vaughn's men came through the gate. One of them took the lead rope gently, professionally, and walked Sable toward the road. Sable went. Slowly, ears back, but he went. Maren stood in the yard with her arms at her sides and watched. She had spent 22 years being the one nobody chose. She knew how this felt. She was practiced at it. Sable reached the gate. And stopped. Vaughn clicked his tongue. Forward. Nothing. One of the soldiers tugged the rope. Sable's hooves were planted like he had grown there. He turned his head, not toward the road, not toward the riders, but back toward Maren, standing alone in the yard with her arms at her sides. He pulled the rope free. He walked back to her. He stopped at her shoulder and stood there, and did not move again. The silence was total. Vaughn stared. His men stared. Maren stared. This, Vaughn said, very quietly, has never happened. Vaughn tried 3 more times. Each time, Sable walked back to her. Not dramatically. Not with any show of defiance. Simply, quietly, with absolute certainty, the way a river returns to its course. He would go to the gate. He would stop. He would turn around. He would come back to Maren and stand at her shoulder as if that was the only place in the world that made sense. By the 3rd attempt, one of the soldiers had stopped pretending to help. He just stood with the rope slack in his hands, watching the horse with an expression Maren had never seen on a grown man's face before. Something like awe. Leave him, Vaughn said finally. He looked at Maren for a long moment. She could not read his face. Then he turned his horse and rode back down the frost road without another word, and his men went with him. Maren stood in the yard alone with Sable until the sound of hooves faded into silence. What are you? She whispered. Sable pressed his nose against her cheek. She had no answer. She went inside and made herself eat something. Her hands were shaking again. This time she wasn't sure why. The rider arrived at the capital before nightfall. King Draven came himself the next morning. He rode without ceremony, no banners, no procession, just 6 guards and a grey horse and a king who had not slept. He was younger than she expected. Broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, with the particular stillness of a man who had learned to keep everything off his face in rooms full of people watching for weakness. He stopped at her gate and looked at Sable standing at her shoulder. He was quiet for a long time. He won't come? Draven asked. No, Maren said. You didn't train him to stay? I found him drowning. I pulled him out. I gave him grain and blankets. She paused. That's all I did. Draven dismounted. He walked to the gate slowly, the way you approach something you don't want to startle, and stood there studying her the way nobody had ever studied her before, not with want, not with suspicion, but with the focused attention of a man trying to solve something important. What is your name? He asked. Maren. Aldrich's daughter. The change in him was immediate. Subtle but total, like watching ice shift on a river a second before it breaks. His jaw tightened. His eyes moved across her face with a new kind of attention. Aldrich, he repeated. Very quietly. The way you say the name of someone you have not said aloud in 20 years. He died 2 years ago, Maren said. He was a farmer. He left me the land. He was not a farmer. Draven's voice was careful. Precise. As if each word was being chosen from a very small selection. Your father was the royal horsemaster of Valdenmoor. The finest this kingdom has ever had. He served the crown for 11 years. He paused. And then he left. Took a new name, moved to the furthest edge of the realm, and disappeared. Maren stared at him. That is not possible, she said. I would have known. He made certain you wouldn't. Why? Draven looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, not cruelty, not evasion. Something closer to grief. Because what he knew when he left, he said slowly, was worth killing to protect. And he loved you enough to make you invisible. The yard was very quiet. The frost road was empty. Somewhere above them a bird moved through the white sky and was gone. Maren thought about her father. His hands, always careful. The way he never talked about before. The way he would sometimes go still in the middle of an ordinary moment, standing at the window, watching the road, with an expression she had never understood. She had thought it was grief. A man missing something he had lost. She understood now he had been watching for something to arrive. It had just taken 22 years. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the silver medallion. She held it out across the gate. Drayvon looked at it. His face did something complicated. "Where did you get this?" he said. "It was in his mane," Maren said. "When I found him." Drayvon took the medallion slowly. He turned it over in his hands. When he looked up at her again, something had shifted in him, some final piece settling into a place he hadn't known was empty. "Sable doesn't fall through ice," he said. "He has crossed the Greyvale 100 times in worse conditions than this." He looked at the horse standing quietly at Maren's shoulder. "He went in on purpose." The words landed like stones in still water. "He found you," Drayvon said. Maren said nothing. She was looking at Sable, at the silver marking on his chest, deliberate and strange, like a palm pressed flat, and understanding, slowly, that nothing about the last 4 days had been an accident. Not the sound from the river. Not the rope in her hands. Not the choice to turn back. Everything her father had hidden, everything he had carried alone for 22 years, every morning he had stood at the window watching the road, it had all been pointing here. To this yard. To this gate. To a king standing on one side of it and Aldrich's daughter standing on the other. With the sacred stallion of Valdenmoor choosing her. Maren looked at Drayvon. "Tell me what my father knew," she said. It was not a request. Drayvon looked at her for a long moment. And then, for the first time since he had arrived, something in his face loosened. Not surrender. Recognition. He had spent 11 years looking for a person he could trust with what was coming. He was beginning to understand that Aldrich had spent 22 years building her. He opened the gate. She had spent her whole life being the one nobody chose. She had one horse at her shoulder, one king at her gate, and a secret in her hands that was worth killing to protect. She had not decided yet what she would do with any of it. But for the first time in 22 years, she was nobody's secret. And she was done being invisible. Asterisk if Sable walking back to her made you feel something, drop it in the comments. I read every single one, asterisk. Asterisk new stories every week, subscribe so you never miss one, and if this story stayed with you, leave a like.